In 814, Charlemagne's death left his only surviving legitimate son, Louis the Pious, in sole possession of a massive geopolitical monopoly. The Carolingian Empire now covered the bulk of Western Europe. But running a landmass that stretches from modern-day Spain to Germany, using 9th-century roads and scribes on horseback, was an administrative nightmare. Louis knew the sheer size of the empire made it highly vulnerable to internal fracturing. This manuscript illumination reveals Louis's solution, the Ordinatio Imperii of 817. It established a strict hierarchy. Louis named his eldest son, Lothair, joint emperor. Younger sons, Pepin and Louis the German, were given subordinate regional management roles in Aquitaine and Bavaria, strictly answering to Lothair. By legally mandating such a steep power imbalance among his heirs, Louis the Pious ensured his younger sons felt disenfranchised, accidentally providing them with the exact motive they needed to eventually rebel. The succession plan might have held together, if not for a biological catalyst. In 823, Louis's second wife, Judith, gave birth to a new half-brother, Charles the Bald. This visualization shows the immediate problem. Louis attempted to carve out a new kingdom for Charles, which directly diluted the territorial shares already promised to his older sons. The older brothers revolted. The next decade devolved into a series of hostile takeovers. Between 830 and 834, Louis the Pious was repeatedly deposed by his own sons, imprisoned, and then reinstated as shifting alliances broke down. The moment a fourth heir entered the equation, the corporate structure collapsed. The Carolingian monopoly proved entirely incapable of surviving the ambitions of its own prospective executives. This stone effigy marks the tomb of Louis the Pious. When he died in 840, the fragile internal truces died with him, leaving a massive power vacuum at the top of the European order.
Faster, more urgently, Lothair immediately moved to execute a hostile takeover. Discarding the previous partition agreements entirely, he claimed absolute, unified jurisdiction over the whole empire. For Charles the Bald and Louis the German, Lothair's power grab was an existential threat to their survival. The two younger half-brothers formed a desperate defensive alliance to protect their remaining territories. The corporate dispute escalated into physical slaughter at the Battle of Fontenoy in June 841. Tens of thousands of Frankish troops clashed in the mud, delivering a massive, bloody check to Lothair's expansion. Fontenoy proved that military force alone could no longer hold the European continent together. The absolute monopoly was finished. In 842, Charles and Louis formalized their military merger against Lothair by publicly swearing the Oaths of Strasbourg. They used a highly specific tactical maneuver. Instead of speaking the traditional Latin of the court, Louis swore his oath in early Old French so Charles's soldiers could understand him. Charles then swore his in early Old High German for the benefit of Louis's troops. This manuscript page, preserved by the historian Nithard, provides the physical evidence. It marks the first time these vernacular languages were recorded in a formal written document. By literally writing the language shifting from a Romance dialect to a Germanic one, the document highlights a glaring logistical reality. The two armies were completely incapable of understanding each other's native tongues. The Oaths of Strasbourg codified the death of Charlemagne's unified Frankish culture. In its place, permanently segregated, localized identities had already taken root. Following the oaths, mutual military exhaustion, compounded by Viking raids along the northern coasts, forced all three brothers to the negotiation table in 843. They signed the Treaty of Verdun, executing the final, exhausted divestiture of the Carolingian conglomerate. This map shows the explicit borders drawn by the treaty. Charles the Bald received West Francia. Louis the German took East Francia. Lothair retained the imperial title and the central strip, known as Middle Francia, but the division contained a fatal geopolitical weakness. Lothair's Middle Francia was an elongated, practically indefensible strip stretching from the North Sea down into Italy. It was completely exposed on all sides. Conversely, West and East Francia possessed the geographic cohesion necessary to consolidate their power and mount proper border defenses in the centuries to follow. By finally settling their shareholder dispute, Charlemagne's grandsons mapped out the rough borders of modern France and Germany. In doing so, they also created a fractured, contested middle ground, one that Europe's future empires would fight over for the next 1,000 years.